But welcome. I know we've been saying welcome as like everybody walked through the door, but the official welcome, we've begun. My name is Liska Wilson. I am CFNE's communications director, and I'm just gonna be like the MC a little bit for today's open house. Just introing and getting us started, but then we'll have some other voices chime in to like share the real meat and potatoes of today's session. So if you want to share screen, Josie, for the slides, and we can jump right in. And while Josie's getting that up, I don't think that everyone here has like received like newsletters or anything like that. But open house is almost like a reflection of our newsletter along with some additional topics. But the theme that we had this fall for our newsletter and essentially our open house is climate resilience, climate change, and the ways that we address that. So why did we choose climate resilience for the focus? When putting the open house together and the newsletter, we wanted to focus on something that was relevant, not only to us, but also the greater community. And in thinking about that, a few things stood out, right? The increase in climate change impact here in the Northeast, across the country, and even across the world. The increase in available funding towards climate mitigation through things like the Inflation Reduction Act that created the Greenhouse Reduction Fund, Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, and you'll hear more about that later. And just the fact that co-ops are generally at the front of climate resilience mitigation. And you also hear some stories about that also. We felt those were powerful reasons to give climate the spotlight for this open house. You know, the need for climate change solutions and the co-op interest to create them is, you know, that kind of puts CFNE almost at like a intersection. We find ourselves at this intersection of ways that we can support that in ways to an intersection that we can intentionally grow into. So today's open house is our opportunity to share part of this journey with y'all. And I just wanted to share like another fun fact I just learned the other day, that out of approximately 1,400 certified CDFIs in the country, CFNE is like one of about five that focus primarily on employee-owned enterprises. So with all like the good juice and like the greatness that is co-ops, and us being like such a small percentage of certified CDFIs that support that, you know, that puts us in a unique position to be able to help facilitate change through the co-op sector in the Northeast. So before we jump in, this is like a smallish enough group. I'm not gonna make y'all come on audio, but this is our icebreaker question, just kind of get to know each other. And you can also put in the chat your name, what state you might be in. I know that through registration, we have some folks that are not even in the Northeast, so I don't know if they're here right now, but you can drop in the chat your name, state, organization, and your answer to the icebreaker question. And maybe we'll take like one or two people off audio if anyone was interested in like sharing their name, where they're coming in from, and the answer to the icebreaker. And you can just come off mute because I can't see all the hands and all the things.
Day after tomorrow in 2012.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else? All right. I'll share mine. My answer to the icebreaker. I finished reading Parable of the Sower recently, a book by Octavia Butler. Highly recommend. Totally did not anticipate reading it. Didn't even know what it was about when I picked it up, but it very relevant to our times. But we'll keep it rocking. We'll keep going. Keep it, throwing your answers and your intros into the chat. Oh yes, Maggie, we're on the same page. Parable of the Sower. All right, so this is our general about us mission statement. You can find this on our website and almost anywhere else that we are. So I'm not going to go through and read it. You can read that when you have the opportunity to. But the few things that I want y'all to take away from this, that you can bring back to people. Just to remember, number one, CFNE's lending program was developed for co-ops. Number two, CFNE offers free or low cost coaching and learning programs specifically for co-ops. And I had just mentioned previously that we're less than 1% of certified CDFIs that focus on employee-owned enterprises. So when you're out there in the world and you happen to come across a cooperator, you're at a co-op, remember CFNE and all the things that we do so you can point them in the right direction. And speaking of remembering, before we continue with the rest of today's open house, we just want to take a brief moment to honor and remember Clark Arrington. He was one of our board members who also served on our governance and racial equity committees. He passed away in late September, so just about a month ago. He served on and off our board since 1991. If you knew Clark, you know just how special he was. I personally loved how outspoken he was. He was going to say what he needs to say, um, regardless. If you never had the opportunity to interact with him, I'll be sharing a couple links in a moment so you can get to know him. But before I do that, we just want to invite you all to reflect on like a brief moment of silence in his honor. Again, if you know him, you can reflect on his memory. If you don't know him, we encourage you to reflect on how you can contribute to creating a more equitable and just economic future for all. So, quick moment. All right. I live in a noisy neighborhood, but I'm appreciating that I heard some birds just now. So, going to share those links. This first link is to a video that honored Clark's induction to the Co-op Hall of Fame back in 2021. And then this second link is just a brief write-up that we did on our website. All right. We can go on to the next slide, Josie. We're almost to the meat and potatoes, y'all, I promise. Just real quick, I know sometimes people do have to jump early, so a lot of these briefs here, and I'm gonna drop the links in a sec, are on our website for you to learn more, but we'll talk more about the Climate Resilience Projected Project Survey. Mika will talk about that and updated perspectives. We won't get into that too much today, but you can find it through the link and kind of check out what our perspectives is all about. And then lastly, changed on the CFNE Board of Trustees. In addition to Clark's absence, we also had a new cycle of board members that recently joined us as well. So I'm going to drop those links. And again, you can find those all on our website. And then one more quick update before we get into the agenda. We have our learning team. They produce a ton of amazing webinars throughout the year. And next month is the next one. Some of you may be familiar with our fellowship program, our Navigator Fellowship program. So this will be an opportunity to continue to stay on that journey with us and learn more about what's been happening and learn more about what we learned over these past few years. And I'll drop the link to that registration as well. Lots of links. And that's the event link. All right. So what are we talking about today? Go with the next one. So we'll have Mika, our executive director, kick us off talking about capitalization updates. Then we'll have Dorian, our deputy executive director, talk about lending. And then our learning team will collaborate on giving you some learning program updates. And just because of the group size, we did have some breakouts planned, but I think it'll make more sense for us to just stay together because we love each other so much and do final Q&A as one big group. I'll still kind of intro what those breakout topics were so you can keep the Q&A kind of in that bundle, which is it'll be covering most of the things that we talked about today. But so don't worry about that number 4 breakout. It'll just be Q&A. But with that said, I'll pass it off to Mika.
Wonderful. Before I get started, I'm just really excited to be here and share space with you all. It's really nice to see kind of the collection of folks who are here. Certainly a lot of CF&E staff, but also folks representing our investor world, both institutions and folks who work with individuals, as well as our borrower world, current and future partners. It's just really kind of a superstar group here. So thank you all for coming. And thanks, Liska, for passing the mic to me. We've been really busy on the capitalization front. And for those who are unfamiliar with that term, we use the term capitalization to refer to how we raise all of the types of funds that we need to raise. So unlike most nonprofits who rely largely on donations and grants, we also need social investments to fuel our lending program. So social investments are loans that we borrow from individuals and institutions, and then we lend those funds to our borrowers. The difference in what we pay our investors and what we charge borrowers is our margin, and that margin covers about 72% of our expenses. So it's a really important part of who we are and what we do. The rest of our expense coverage comes from contributions and grants. Just if you want to learn more about the social investment program, you can do so on our website. And let's see, Liska, you got it. Josie, thank you. Awesome. So while earned income, the income from our loan portfolio, covers most of our budget, we also need to raise contributions and grants for a number of reasons. First of all, we offer many programs to help co-ops and co-op development ecosystem that we don't charge for. And these cost money, and contributions and grants help cover those. Second of all, as a loan fund, we need to grow our net assets in tandem with growing the loan fund, the portfolio. Net assets is a fancy nonprofit word for equity, the part of our financial resources that's ours, that we didn't borrow from someone. So with our portfolio growing a lot over the past couple of years, we also need to be able to grow our net assets in order to have the right balance on our balance sheet. So we're always looking for more of those funds. And I would say if you have potential sources of those funds, please reach out. And I'll be talking in a minute about one really exciting potential source of net asset impacted grants that we're going to be diving in for. I also wanted to give everyone a heads up that this is annual appeal season. I'm sure that it will be for a lot of the nonprofits in your networks. One important reason for the annual appeal is that it is sort of the best way for donors to support the work that you'll be hearing more about from Dorian on the lending side and from the learning team. So I want to encourage folks to keep an eye out for that annual appeal that's forthcoming and consider supporting the campaign either by mailing back a check or donating online. We're particularly looking for more people interested in making monthly donations. So keep that in mind if that might work for you. Greenhouse gas reduction fund. So this is where there's some really exciting new developments coming on the capitalization front. As Liska mentioned earlier, we're focusing a lot on co-ops in the climate space today because of the confluence of three really powerful currents, right? The first is that the climate crisis is upon us, right? Certainly, we all read or even experienced hurricanes Milton and Helene recently, and every day we hear about other climate disasters. Co-ops are often positioned at the forefront of climate resilience and mitigation work, and you'll hear more about that later. And sort of the new exciting development is that the federal government is providing billions of dollars in support for the clean energy transition and is really seeing community loan funds like CFNE as a critical intermediary in deploying these funds. So where are these funds coming from? They're coming through a program called the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which was embedded in the Inflation Reduction Act. And of course, because it's the federal government, there are acronyms related to all of those. GGRF is the acronym that I'll be referring most to. Within GGRF, there are three programs that help finance solar energy development and net zero emission buildings and vehicles in communities disproportionately impacted by climate change. And so CFNE is working to figure out what our role can be in that program. Our National Trade Association, which is called the Opportunity Finance Network, received a $2 billion, that's billion with a B, $2 billion commitment from the EPA that they're planning on distributing to their members in order to finance climate-related projects. And you'll hear more in a minute about some of the climate-related projects that we've supported in the past. So just in the coming months, we're going to be preparing to hopefully successfully receive and then deploy this funding. One part of that preparation is going to be an upcoming survey launch where we're going to be asking our clients, both lending and technical assistance, to think about what projects would they like to do that are climate impacted, as well as for those groups that have done climate related work, what have been the most valuable resources and the most challenging situations that they've encountered so that we can help support the next wave of climate projects, access those resources and address those challenges even more easily. So if you're a co-op in the Northeast, really want to, or, I see folks from Fleurs de Laboral here, which we help finance. Thanks for being here. Want to really encourage you to keep an eye out for that survey because that's going to help us develop the program that we're really excited about. And I think that is what I was prepared to share. Certainly, if folks have questions about any of that, we'll have the Q&A at the end.
And I think then Micha's turning it over to me. Hi, everyone. Like Micha said, I'm really pleased to see everyone. My name is Dorian Gregory. I'm the Deputy Executive Director here at CFNE, and I'm largely responsible for our lending program, though I try to provide support wherever I can stick my nose in. So if you have questions on the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund and some of the capitalization items that Micha brought up, do jot them down. I'm going to shift gears just a little bit, but I'll circle back to the same topic. Can flip the slide. Just some comments to bring everybody up to date, kind of where we are with meeting mission and market needs. I often think of our lending operation as, the heart of what we do. The funds that we steward, we take seriously, and we try to make sure that we're doing all we can to support co-ops throughout the region in meeting their capital needs. So in 2024, I can just give you kind of a brief update. So far, we've made 25 loans to 10 new borrowers. And what's interesting about those 10 new borrowers, they're mostly conversions. 60%, 6 out of the 10, are conversions from sole proprietors, family-run businesses, retiring business owners, to employees who formed a cooperative in order to purchase the business. And we've been in this space for many years. We've been anticipating and working to support and further encourage the conversion to cooperative enterprise. And it's been really gratifying in some ways to see. Last year, I think we did 4 conversions. This year, so far, 6 conversions. In the few years before that, we maybe did as many in that many years. So it is the tsunami, as it has been referred to, is flowing in, and we are seeing more and more. So I find that very exciting. And I think it's also part of the general move. You know, for me, what's exciting about it is part of what I see in the co-op sector generally, and what we'll comment on later is the way that cooperatives, because of course they're focused on a profitable business because that's what they need to be doing, but they're also more attentive to people and planet. And so we do see cooperatives taking on climate mitigation projects, and the upcoming opportunity to provide low-cost, meaningful financing for those specific projects will be really exciting. We are long-term partners in financing. This year so far, we've dispersed over $10 million and expect another 5 to go out before the end of the year. And our co-ops are using revolving loans to manage business growth, seasonal cash flows. We're also finding that several businesses that converted in previous years are now in a position to stabilize the business even further by purchasing the real estate that they are using, or in some cases, new real estate. But often it's the real estate that the selling owner years back retained when they sold the business, and they're now in a position for the co-op business to purchase that. So we're able to finance those purchases as well. So yeah, meeting market and mission, segueing a little bit more toward the cooperative and the climate-friendly lending. I think what I want to comment on is the way that we see co-ops at the vanguard, if you will, of climate mitigation solutions, particularly when we're looking at marginalized or strategically undervalued communities that tend to be the hardest hit by climate disasters. Our work in the last few years to better serve those communities is also ensuring that climate-friendly business solutions get financed through cooperative endeavors in strategically undervalued communities. What we're about to embark on in the coming year, we're really looking at work we've been doing and lessons learned. So many of you might know, several years back in 2018, we began to develop a pre-development early stage business launch loan to meet the needs in marginalized communities for early stage capital. And if we learn nothing else, we learned that innovation is best when the community served are part of designing that product. We've certainly found in debt financing, even patient, inexpensive debt, it's still the last resort for co-op business startup capital. It's better to access grants and donations, lots of technical assistance. And investing in that technical assistance has been crucial. But now we're being asked to start innovating and creating new products and services that are relevant to climate mitigation projects that reduce greenhouse gases. There'll be things like solar projects for residential and commercial real estate, energy efficiency upgrades, and the like. So as we look to do this project, like I said, when we innovate, we've learned it's always best we learn from the folks we're trying to serve. So we're real excited to see the results of the survey that's going out, and hope everyone will contribute, whether you are in a position to implement a project or you just know some things about projects. Get the information toward us. We know we're going to need to make some serious investments in capacity and technical assistance, as well as our own infrastructure to support compliance and reporting to meet this crucial opportunity. One of the ways that we've been looking at our portfolio and our work in the sector over these years, you may have noticed last couple years, we've got a new tagline, funding the future. And yeah, not quite ready for that slide back still. I'm still on my little equation, but I'm almost there. National Co-op Business Association this year during their Co-op Impact Conference celebrated the month of October, Cooperatives Month. Just bringing home the 2024 theme that the future is cooperative. And from where I'm looking at it, you put those things together and you start to see climate-friendly lending. Ways that we're seeing co-ops mitigating against the worst effects of climate change are things like the worker-owned solar installers, the energy efficiency businesses that we finance, the ways that community-owned food stores that prioritize local food, right, reducing carbon emissions in the supply chain, and prioritizing energy efficiency and refrigeration, whether through solar roof panels, offsetting energy consumption, otherwise supporting low-income co-op members to access community solar. And residential housing co-ops that are installing solar panels on their roofs and engaging in weatherization programs in their homes. These are all ways that prior to the Inflation Reduction Act, prior to GGRF, our co-ops are pushing for climate mitigation. Now I'm ready for the next slide. Just to hit on a couple of examples, and I won't spend too much more time, but River Valley Co-op is a 2-store food co-op grocery store in Western Massachusetts. They started 16 years ago, opened the first store in 2008 with financing from CFNE. When a food co-op is first getting off the ground, that's when they are A, the most vulnerable, and B, the least likely to get a bank to finance them. So CFNE is in the position to come in and provide that early stage financing for food co-ops, help them get off the ground. Often they're capital intensive, huge projects. Generally, banks see that, oh, look how that CDFI works with them. Oh, and they get paid back. Oh, the bank, it gets a little more courage to come in. And then, of course, as the business builds assets and has real estate and other things to collateralize, they'll come in. So by the time River Valley Co-op was ready to open their second store, they were in a position to work with some local co-ops. Another borrower of ours, PV Squared, a solar installer, and Co-op Power, community consumer co-op building alternative renewable energy support across the region. All these different players came in together to create what is now being recognized as probably the first, if not the only, net zero grocery store in North America. The amount of energy that a grocery store takes to do all the wonderful things we come to rely on is pretty intense. So kudos to River Valley Co-op, and I'm glad we can call ourselves long-term financing partners. We also just this year financed La Finca. The next slide, please. This is a BIPOC-owned farm up in Maine. And another area that we think about climate mitigation is anchoring really friendly farming practices back in small farms and in the hands of people who've been pushed off the land. So Black, Indigenous, people of color taking control of the land, taking control of the farms, and creating farming practices and growing food in ways that do not harm the climate, but rather contribute to climate disaster mitigation. So we're excited to finance La Finca up in Maine and working with the Community Land Trust to help make that happen. And the last one I highlight is Energia. This is a worker-owned business in, again, Western Massachusetts. And their specialty is doing energy efficiency upgrades to residential and commercial buildings. And they were incubated years back, again, a consortium of worker owners plus co-op power, and a local nonprofit focused on BIPOC farmers, Nuestras Raíces, all came together to create this business that ultimately transferred 100% worker ownership and in 2018. And again, they're contributing to sustainable, resilient communities by creating better energy efficiency and weatherization around the region. So those are just a couple of the highlights. There's a ton of similar borrowers in the portfolio, and we're just, yeah, really excited to continue to finance cooperatives and climate mitigation, climate disaster mitigation. I'm going to stop there. Again, we'll have a chance for questions and answers, and I'm going to turn it over to Carolyn, the director of our learning team, and Johan, Carla. It looks like I'll let you all take over from here.
Awesome. Thank you, Dorian. Bye, David. So yeah, we're going to continue with the climate justice theme and talk a little bit both about our ecosystem development and some exciting collaborations we have around land justice, and also a few climate justice stories from clients who've been receiving technical assistance from us. That's not to take away from this picture that's here, is from this weekend, we the whole learning team and a bunch of folks from our Co-op Navigator Fellowship were at the Beyond Business as Usual conference in Hartford, put on by one of our Co-op Navigator Fellows, Varun and Cooperate Connecticut. And so just to say that, you know, the Co-op Navigator Fellowship, that ecosystem development work, and the Northeast Transition Initiative, and that work with transitioning businesses to cooperatives that Dorian was referring to, that's all continuing. But today we're going to take an ecosystem climate focus, and I'll pass it off to Johan to start talking about the land justice collaboratives.
Yes, thank you, Carolyn. So good evening, everyone. I'm Johan Matthews, Ecosystem Strategy Manager here, and also member of the learning team. And so as Carolyn mentioned, we've been broadening our focus to move not only from supporting enterprises, just individual co-ops who need support, whether they're a borrower or they're in the Northeast. We're now widening our frame to the ecosystem, right, to the environment that supports cooperative life and cooperative enterprise. Because we realized some environments, because of decades of racially motivated disinvestment, are less supportive to co-op life. And so in that recognition, in deepening our sense of what racial equity means in this work, we've started to do more investment into ecosystem development. And so that looks a variety of ways, some of which Carolyn just mentioned, on our fellowship with NETI, the Northeast Transition Initiative, and as our fellowship with the Co-op Navigator Challenge fellowship. So those, and that's referring to that webinar coming up next month. So you can look at a webinar from last month, and we'll have a webinar in November about those fellowship programs. Today, I'll share briefly on some of our collaborations with other service providers, where we're able to share some of our lived experiences as a funder. No, we can go back still. As a funder, and help to essentially cultivate resources in emerging ecosystem environments supporting co-ops across the Northeast. And so one of them is about land justice. We're partnering with groups such as NEFO, the Northeast Farmers of Color, Black Farmer Fund, the African Alliance of Rhode Island, Resist, and others, other homegrown or locally led community-centered service providers. We're now cooperating with them as a result of this increasing quality of engagement with them, of building relationships with other players in this ecosystem. And so we're now partnered with these groups to facilitate and to deliver resources in the form of grant and loan capital to farmers across the Northeast, in New York, in Massachusetts, in Connecticut, and Rhode Island. And so this is going to be millions of dollars poured into those environments to facilitate land justice in the form of land access. We know that 98% of the land, farming related, is owned by folks who identify as white. So these communities, these environments where food is being produced and transportation is being considered. We don't have that level of equity there. And so these types of investments are very important from the ecosystem perspective. And we're going to be doing that, as I mentioned, in New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island, supporting the delivery of grants and loans, millions of dollars, as well as connecting those communities with each other and just building our relationships with other service providers. So I don't know if what we're going to get into as far as the breakout Q&A, but we can talk about the other ecosystem development initiatives, as well as this one if folks have any questions. And I'll invite Carla to share more about some of these stories. Or maybe it's Karen.
Yeah. So it would be, hi, I'm Carla Torres. I'm part of the learning team here at CFNE. And yeah, one of our, if we can go to the next slide, one of our worker co-ops, owner co-ops that we work with is Tortilleria Semilla. They are a worker owner co-op in Connecticut that is reconciling traditions while addressing climate change through local and sustainable processes. They emerged out of the pandemic in New Haven with the desire to provide natural, quality food products in a community where processed foods are often the only affordable option. It's founded by 3 members, Ana, Eli, and Javier, which all 3 remain active members in this collective and share the same dream of fighting for the rights of workers, migrants, and indigenous communities in a climate justice space. Together, they combined their recipe with ancient nixtamalization process, which involves boiling dried corn with limestones, soaking it overnight, and grinding it into a masa and dough that you could use for tortillas or other foods like tamales. And this is a traditional method that's been done for over 4,000 years, which enhances flavor and nutritional values that it's not common in their community. And it's a huge difference because unlike other versions of what they would have access to in regular supermarkets that are full of chemicals, preservatives, made months in advance and created a lot of climate issues within the transportation. They came to us and are part of our lunch loan, and they were able to start and work on their business ideas. And with our support, they have overcome significant systematic barriers, just like getting licenses and permits and becoming financially literate to be a better co-op and a stronger co-op. And the next thing that they want to do, they're currently selling out tortillas in local stores and farmers market, but they want to continue to open their own space, aiming to create a community hub where people can buy fresh tortillas and share the space with other true community businesses and nonprofits, which would reduce their carbon footprint. They believe that it's important to have the access of the traditional foods that you're used to, so that way people are not made to go into stores and buy them internationally instead of having them just locally being produced. As well, there's going to be collaborating with Riquezas del Campo, which is an immigrant-led worker-owned farm to source locally their corn in the future, promoting food security and reducing environmental impact. It's a really, really cool place. If you want to know a little bit more, I would like to share their Instagram quickly, just because they have some, if you're in the area, the food is fantastic to check here, check them out. They have events, they have pop-ups, and do make it into their newsletters or send them information because they make tortilla making classes. So it's a pretty cool thing to learn if you can. And I'm not sure who I'm passing it to, but whoever's next.
I will jump back in. Thank you. The other story we wanted to share was about a borrower called Tooties Tempe. Pronunciation note, Tooties, like toots. This is a worker-owned co-op in Biddeford, Maine. They produce organic, sustainably made, and locally sourced tempeh made out of fermented soybeans. They received a startup loan from CFNE in 2020, and that let their founders develop this innovative process for fermenting using metal pans. So if you've ever bought tempeh in the store, usually there's like an outer plastic package, and then there's an inner plastic package that the soybeans are actually fermented in. They've eliminated all of that inner single-use plastic, and they've already reduced, they've taken like 60,000 of those single-use bags diverted from landfills by doing the fermentation in pans. So, starting in 2020, they used our loan for equipment to start developing that process. Over the past 3 years, they've been growing very steadily and strategically, and now they're in over 100 restaurants, farmers markets, and grocery stores, including 17 food co-ops throughout New England. And they approached the learning team because in order to continue to scale, they realized that they need, more members, they need more workers. And some of the workers were getting hung up on, could they become members the way that the buy-in for member buy-in was structured? Some of the folks felt like, well, we only work part-time, we don't know how affordable this is, seems like a big chunk to bite off. And so they asked us to do some education with them and help them have some conversations about how to think about an equity buy-in. Why is that important to have some member financial participation in the cooperative? What are ways to make it more affordable? How do you determine an appropriate amount, and so on? And I'm happy to say that they went back and talked amongst themselves, and they did decide to reduce the membership price from $5,000 to $3,500, and also to let people pay it in over time through payroll deduction. So that made it a lot more accessible. Two of the worker owners immediately joined on as members. So that felt like a really good outcome from their engagement with us, to be able to support them as an ongoing borrower. And now their next project is going to be working over the winter to educate local potato farmers and other farmers to use soybeans as a cover crop, which, as you know or may know, enriches the soil, and also would be an additional crop, an additional revenue source for those farmers. And it would let Tooties keep on increasing their production while using a local supply. So, not only reducing the plastics and making their tempeh in a solar powered facility, but also really reducing the transit miles and emissions from bringing in supplies from outside of the region. So that's just, one way that through CFNE's support, Tooties has been able to both grow their business and continue to increase their climate impact. And I think I'm going to pass it back to Liska now.
All right. So that covers all our updates. So we would have been going into breakouts, but we're going to keep it on this slide real quick because I know y'all want to scan the QR codes and do the sign up. So I'm gonna give y'all a minute to take your phone out, get into the camera and do your thing. And one thing that we did want to mention before we go to the Q&A that we didn't mention before. So this is a pop quiz. When was CFNE founded? Okay, I'm kidding. You don't have to answer because I told y'all not even to read that slide. But we were founded in 1975. 2025 will be our 50th anniversary, and we will be doing a series of events throughout the year across the Northeast, mixers where you can come meet us, and you can get to meet some of our clients and borrowers as well at our pop-up mixers. We'll also have a virtual one in early in 2025. So if you're not, in the Northeast, then you can still, pop out and check us out and just mix and mingle a little bit with us. So stay tuned for details on more of what we'll be doing for the 50th. We'll have some special things on the website as well. So get excited. I'm a little excited for the mixers and popping out. So that kind of concludes today's open house. If you want to go 2 slides, Josie, or we can stay here, it actually doesn't even matter. But we can kind of get into the Q&A. As I said, we were going to do breakouts, one focusing on fundraising at CFNE that Nika would have been leading, kind of getting more into this is how we raise money. This is what we use the money for. So if you have some questions around that, we'll take those. We're going to have a breakout room for ecosystem development with Johan and Carolyn. So if you have some questions around some things that we've already presented or some additional questions around ecosystem development in the Northeast, you can use Q&A time for that as well. And then lastly, climate friendly lending, if you had questions around that. Or if you just want to share experiences related to any of these things, we are always listening. So if you just want to, share something, then this is the time for that also. So if you want to raise your hand, you or come off mute, whatever you want to do. If you want to just, give us a shout out. That's good too. So
And maybe when you come off and ask a question, maybe talk about for a minute your connection to CFNE. I know, again, we have folks here from all over our kind of organizational web. And I'd love for folks to share that.
I'll start. Raul Figueroa from Fuerza Laboral. Our connection with CFNE, we are a current borrower, and as well as one of the hosts for the Co-op Navigator. So my question was related to the I forgot what the name you gave to, but it's the landing for climate related projects. I know you were talking about emphasize a little bit about cooperatives, but is this also will include to organizations that support cooperatives, etc. And I guess the question specifically is like, is there any specific projects that or any specific criteria that you will be considering for this? I just wanted to, if you can talk just a little bit more, maybe some details around that, that would be great.
Yeah, maybe I'll start and then see if other folks have more to add to that. There's kind of CFNE's filter, and then there's the EPA dictate filter. So for CFNE, we're both interested in projects that will fit within the greenhouse gas reduction fund box and projects that won't, but that are still exciting climate related projects, right? So a lot of the local food work probably won't fit into the GGRF box, but we still want to hear about folks' aspirations and plans and see how we might help realize those. For CFNE, we work with a number of nonprofits, particularly those in the co-op ecosystem. And so I anticipate that we'll be excited to help drive GGRF resources to those organizations as well as to actual co-ops themselves. For EPA itself, there's still some clarity forthcoming on what's going to be eligible. My current understanding is that there are going to be filters along the borrower as well as the use of the funds. So for the use of the funds, it's going to be around distributed energy generation and storage. So think solar panels and battery systems to store that energy, and then net zero buildings and net zero vehicles. And one open question that I have is, do the buildings and vehicles need to be absolutely net zero, or are projects that help move the buildings and vehicles closer to net zero also eligible? So we'll get more guidance on that as well. As far as the filter for actual borrowers, there are geographic filters where there are a couple of maps that the EPA has produced to highlight environmental justice communities and frontline communities with regard to climate change. And so that's where EPA wants those resources to go. Justice 40 is a program that the federal government rolled out to help identify where a lot of federal resources should be going. So GGRF is aligned with the Justice 40 initiative. So we'll be getting more information on what that actually looks like. We can work with folks to explore the maps and see how those maps overlay with where you're working. And again, for projects that don't fit within the GGRF frame, we're still interested in hearing about them and seeing what we can do to support them. I don't know if there's a follow-up from you, Raul, or anyone else, or if Dorian or anyone has more to add to
I
that.
do have one quick follow-up before I forget. So
Yeah.
this is, we're talking about loans, not grants, correct?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and the lending criteria is still sort of kind of like the is it the same interest rate, or is it lower, or is it
we're gonna need to figure that out.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, this is all, we're very early in the GGRF process. Right now, OFN, the National Trade Association, is launching a training program for community loan funds that are trying to build out their program, their data systems. Hey, I love the future cooperator here. Hello. The data systems, the product design, all of that stuff. So we're going to be going through that training program, knock on wood, and then that will help inform what we're able to offer to the co-op community. So right now, really, we want people to know that it's forthcoming, to start thinking about what they might want to do and engage in a conversation with us so that we can design products that will help folks meet their goals.
I had a question.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Ryan, Rose. I work at Capital Bookkeeping Co-op. I also live at a group of houses that's in the process of becoming a housing co-op. And I think the structure that the group's going to go with is like a nonprofit co-op. And I was wondering if you lent to like, I wasn't familiar with like the nonprofit housing co-op, but was curious if that was something that you'd come across.
Yeah, actually, I first connected with CFNE as a borrower when I helped develop a housing co-op that used a nonprofit model to own the property, and then a cooperative internal governance model to ensure that the tenants were actually controlling the nonprofit and the property. There are certainly questions from our experience with that model that we'd love to talk with you about, challenges that we've seen other folks who've taken that path encounter. And so that can be a longer, more in-depth conversation to make sure that you all are thinking about the things that we've seen over and over again. But we've
Yeah, that'd be
definitely
great.
seen, yeah, great.
Thank you.
Have any other questions, comments? All right. There's so many different emails. So I'm gonna drop mine and I can route it, if there are additional questions and maybe you don't want to ask them here. So I'm gonna drop my email in the chat. And if you do have another question, feel free to send it to me. I'll make sure it gets to the right person and that you get a response. But other than that, if there's nothing else, then we're all done here. Y'all can enjoy the rest of your evening. And I really appreciate y'all showing up and being engaged.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good
Thanks,
night, y'all.
everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks all.